Would you dare check into a hotel where guests vanish into secret chambers, never to be seen again, citais? Holmes, America's first documented serial killer, whose murder castle in Chicago became a labyrinth of death during the 1893 World's Fair. A charming doctor with a devil's heart. Holmes lured dozens to their doom with a smile that hid his monstrous deeds. How could a man so polished craft such a gruesome legacy? If you're ready to uncover the chilling truth about this twisted figure, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends to dive into history's darkest corners. Let's start with Herman Webster Mudgett, the man who became H. Holmes, and the shocking trait that defined his sinister genius. Born in 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire, Herman Webster Mudgett grew up in a strict Methodist family, his early life marked by discipline and ambition. A brilliant child with a knack for science, he was also eerily detached. Neighbors recalled him dissecting animals with unsettling calm. By 16, he married Clara Lovering, a farmer's daughter, but his charm masked a restless cruelty. He abandoned Clara soon after enrolling at the University of Michigan's medical school in 1882. There, his fascination with cadavers raised eyebrows. Classmates noted his gleeful approach to dissection, a hint of the darkness within. Modern psychologists suggest this behavior points to psychopathy, with Holmes displaying a lack of empathy that would later fuel his crimes. By 1886, now calling himself Dr. H. Holmes, he arrived in Chicago, a booming city, ripe for his schemes. At 25, Holmes was strikingly handsome, tall, with piercing blue eyes and a smooth voice that disarmed everyone he met. He took a job at a pharmacy in Englewood, charming the owner, Dr. Elizabeth Holton, into selling him the business. Within months, he transformed the pharmacy into a thriving enterprise, winning over customers with his wit. But his charm was a weapon. Holmes began defrauding suppliers, forging checks, and swindling creditors, amassing a small fortune. One chilling detail: when Holton's husband vanished, Holmes claimed he'd moved west, a lie that raised no suspicion at the time. The cornerstone of Holmes's horror was his murder castle, a 3-story building he began constructing in 1887 across from his pharmacy. Marketed as a hotel for the upcoming 1893 World's Fair, it was a fortress of deception. Holmes designed it himself, hiring and firing builders to conceal its secrets. Soundproof rooms, hidden passages, trapdoors, and a basement with a crematorium and acid vats. Building permits show he spent over 50,000 millions as today on the structure, funding it through scams. The castle's purpose was sinister, a trap for unsuspecting guests, mostly young women, drawn to Chicago's fair. Trial records later estimated he killed at least 27 people there, though some believe the toll reached 200. Holmes's shocking trait was his ability to blend into society. He was a chameleon doctor, businessman, lover, whose charisma hid his predatory nature. He married multiple women, including Myrta Belknap in 1887, while still legally tied to Clara, and later Georgiana Yoke, all unaware of his double life. Neighbors described him as kindly, yet he was already luring victims to his castle, their fates sealed behind its locked doors. Modern criminologists compare him to Ted Bundy, noting his use of charm to disarm victims. What drove this polished predator to build a house of horrors? The next chapter takes us inside the murder castle, where Holmes's twisted vision came to life. The construction of the murder castle. H. Holmes was a predator in a doctor's coat, his charm a deadly lure that hid a mind plotting horrors beyond imagination. By 1888, in the heart of Chicago's bustling Englewood neighborhood, he began building his infamous murder castle, a hotel designed not for comfort, but for slaughter. This labyrinth of secret passages and death traps would become the stage for his darkest crimes, a monument to his twisted genius. How could a man so brilliant create a building so evil? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of H. Holmes's depravity, hit that subscribe button like this video, and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Let's dive into the creation of the murder castle, where Holmes's sinister vision took shape. By the late 1880s, Holmes, then 27, had settled into Chicago's Englewood district, a vibrant area poised to profit from the upcoming 1893 World's Fair. Using his pharmacy as a front, he amassed wealth through fraud-forging checks and swindling creditors. His charisma was magnetic. Neighbors described him as a gentleman doctor who tipped his hat to passers-by and offered free medicine to the poor. But behind his warm smile, Holmes was planning something monstrous. In 1887, he purchased a vacant lot across from his pharmacy and began designing a 3-story building, officially a hotel and commercial space, but secretly a killing ground. The murder castle was a marvel of deception. Holmes acted as his own architect, sketching plans that included over 100 rooms across 3 floors, with shops on the ground level and hotel rooms above. Construction began in 1888, but Holmes's cunning ensured secrecy. He hired multiple contractors, firing them after short stints to prevent anyone from grasping the full design. Building records show he employed over 500 workers, none staying long enough to question the oddities: soundproof rooms, hidden staircases, trapdoors, and chutes leading to the basement. The basement itself was a chamber of horrors, equipped with a crematorium, acid vats, and a dissecting table. One contractor later testified he was paid to install a massive furnace, assuming it was for heating, not suspecting its true purpose. Holmes funded the project through scams, defaulting on loans and defrauding suppliers for materials. Estimates suggest he spent $50,000, equivalent to millions today, on the castle, all while charming bankers with promises of World's Fair profits. The building's layout was a predator's dream. Some rooms had gas lines controlled by Holmes's private office, allowing him to asphyxiate victims. Others had false walls or locked doors that trapped guests. A 1895 police report described a room with a steel vault where screams would go unheard. Holmes marketed the hotel as a haven for fairgoers, particularly young women seeking work or adventure in Chicago, unaware they were stepping into a trap. His personal life mirrored his deceit. While married to Myrta Belknap, who lived in nearby Wilmette with their daughter Holmes, courted other women, including Minnie Williams, a wealthy heiress he would later kill. His ability to juggle multiple identities, doctor, husband, businessman, was chilling. Modern criminologists compare him to John Wayne Gacy, noting his knack for exploiting trust. Psychological analyses suggest Holmes's psychopathy drove his need for control with the castle, as a physical extension of his desire to dominate his victims' fates. Neighbors oblivious to the horrors admired his ambition, one calling the castle a fine addition to Englewood. For the victims, the castle was a nightmare. Young women drawn by Chicago's promise checked in and vanished, their belongings sold by Holmes to fund his schemes. The World's Fair, expected to draw millions, was the perfect cover. Disappearances were blamed on the city's chaos. Holmes's charm disarmed suspicion. He hosted community events, deflecting questions with a laugh. But how long could such a predator hide in plain sight? The next chapter takes us into the World's Fair of 1893, where Holmes's killing spree reached its deadly peak. The World's Fair and the height of horror. H. Holmes was a predator who thrived in chaos, and the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago was his perfect hunting ground. As millions flocked to the city to marvel at its wonders, Holmes's murder castle became a silent slaughterhouse, luring victims with promises of lodging and opportunity. Behind his charming smile, he orchestrated a killing spree that turned the fair's excitement into a backdrop for terror. How could a man exploit a city's brightest moment to commit its darkest crimes? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of H. Holmes's depravity, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Let's dive into the World's Fair, where Holmes's murders reached their horrifying zenith. By 1893, Holmes, now 32, was at the peak of his deadly game. Chicago's Columbian Exposition, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage, drew 27 million visitors to the city, transforming it into a glittering hub of innovation. The fair showcased marvels like the first Ferris wheel and electric lights, but Holmes saw only opportunity. His murder castle, completed in 1891, stood ready in Inglewood, its 3 stories of shops and hotel rooms masking a labyrinth of death. With soundproof chambers, trapdoors, and a basement equipped with a crematorium and acid vats, it was a predator's masterpiece, designed to swallow victims unnoticed amid the fair's chaos. Holmes targeted the vulnerable young women seeking work, travelers far from home, and fairgoers drawn by Chicago's promise. He advertised rooms in his World's Fair hotel, offering cheap rates to women like Julia Connor, a pharmacist's wife, who became his lover, and her daughter Pearl. Both vanished in 1891, their bodies likely dissolved in the castle's basement. Holmes's charm was his deadliest weapon. He posed as a benevolent doctor offering jobs or romance to lure victims. Trial records from 1895 reveal he killed at least 27 people, though estimates range up to 200, with many victims being women who checked into his hotel and never left. One chilling detail: Holmes sold their belongings from jewelry to clothing at local markets, profiting from their deaths. The castle's design ensured secrecy. Guests entered normal-looking rooms unaware of hidden gas lines that Holmes could activate from his office to asphyxiate them. Chutes sent bodies to the basement, where Holmes dissected corpses, selling skeletons to medical schools, a grim side hustle. A 1895 police report described a room with a false wall where victims were trapped, their screams muffled. Holmes's methodical nature stunned investigators. He kept detailed records of his scams, but none of his murders, as if erasing his victim's existence. Modern criminologists compare him to Jeffrey Dahmer, noting his ability to dehumanize victims while maintaining a polished facade. Holmes's personal life was as tangled as his crimes. While married to Myrta Belknap and Georgiana Yoke, he seduced women like Minnie Williams, a wealthy heiress who moved into the castle in 1893 with her sister Annie. Both disappeared, their inheritance pocketed by Holmes. Neighbors charmed by his generosity, he often donated to local charities, suspected nothing. The fair's chaos, with thousands of transients vanishing daily, masked his crimes. One victim's sister, searching for her missing sibling, was turned away by Holmes with a smile and a lie she left for California. For families, the loss was a mystery, their loved ones swallowed by Chicago's frenzy. The World's Fair was Holmes's golden hour, but his greed was growing reckless. He began defrauding insurance companies, staging deaths to collect payouts, a scheme that drew attention. How long could he outrun the law in a city teeming with opportunity and danger? The next chapter takes us into Holmes's unraveling, as his scams and murders finally caught the eye of relentless investigators. The World's Fair and the height of horror. Holmes thrived in the shadows of Chicago's 1893 World's Fair, turning the city's celebration of progress into a hunting ground for his monstrous desires. His murder castle, a labyrinth of traps and secret chambers, stood ready to swallow unsuspecting victims, drawn by the fair's promise of opportunity. Behind his polished smile, Holmes orchestrated a killing spree so calculated it made the fair's dazzling lights seem dim in comparison. How could a man exploit a nation's brightest moment to commit its darkest crimes? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of Holmes's depravity, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends. To uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners, let's plunge into the World's Fair, where Holmes's murders reached their terrifying peak. In 1893, Chicago was a city ablaze with ambition. The Columbian Exposition, celebrating the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage, drew 27 million visitors, to marvel at innovations like the Ferris wheel and electric lights. Amid this chaos, Holmes, now 32, saw only prey. His murder castle, completed in 1891, was a 3-story nightmare in Englewood, its hotel rooms and shops hiding soundproof chambers, trapdoors, and a basement with a crematorium and acid vats. Marketed as the World's Fair Hotel, it promised affordable lodging for fairgoers, particularly young women seeking work or adventure. Holmes's charisma, a doctor's charm mixed with a con man's cunning, lured them into his trap. Holmes targeted the vulnerable women, like Julia Connor, a pharmacist's wife, who became his mistress, and her daughter Pearl, both of whom vanished in 1891. Trial records from 1895 confirm he killed at least 27 people, though estimates suggest up to 200, with most victims being women who checked into his hotel and never checked out. He advertised jobs as maids or secretaries, drawing in women like Emmeline Sigrand, a 24-year-old stenographer who disappeared in 1892 after accepting his marriage proposal. Holmes's method was chillingly efficient. He'd charm victims, isolate them in soundproof rooms, and use gas lines controlled from his office to asphyxiate them. Bodies slid down chutes to the basement, where he dissected corpses, dissolving remains in acid, or burning them in his furnace. Some skeletons were sold to medical schools, a grim profit scheme. The castle's design was a predator's masterpiece. A 1895 police report detailed hidden staircases, false walls, and a steel vault where victims suffocated their screams unheard. Holmes kept no records of his murders, but his meticulous fraud ledgers detailing scams worth thousands showed his obsession with control. The fair's chaos was his ally. With millions flooding Chicago, disappearances were blamed on the city's transients. Neighbors charmed by Holmes's donations to local churches suspected nothing. One Englewood resident later recalled, "He was the kindest man, always helping the poor." Modern criminologists compare Holmes to Ted Bundy, noting his ability to blend into society while preying on trust. Holmes's personal life was a web of deceit. Married to Myrta Belknap, who lived in Wilmette, with their daughter he also wed Georgiana Yoke in 1894, all while seducing others like Minnie Williams, a wealthy heiress who moved into the castle with her sister Annie in 1893. Both sisters vanished, their inheritance pocketed by Holmes. His ability to juggle multiple identities, doctor, husband, businessman, was a hallmark of his psychopathy. Psychological analyses suggest his need for dominance drove his crimes the castle, a physical manifestation of his desire to control life and death. For his victims, the fair's promise of a new start became a death sentence, their dreams snuffed out in Holmes's chambers. But how long could such horrors remain hidden in a city under the world's gaze? The next chapter explores the first cracks in Holmes's façade, as his schemes began to unravel. The web of deceit and the first cracks. Holmes was a master of deception, weaving a web of lies that ensnared lovers, business partners, and victims alike, all while his murder castle swallowed lives during Chicago's 1893 World's Fair. His charm and cunning kept suspicion at bay, but as his crimes multiplied, so did his recklessness, drawing the attention of those who would unravel his deadly schemes. How could a man so meticulous in murder be so careless in his lies? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of H. Holmes's twisted empire, hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Let's dive into the tangled web of Holmes's deceit, where his greed and arrogance began to betray him. By 1893, Holmes, now 32, was at the height of his infamy, though the world didn't know it yet. His murder castle in Englewood was a killing machine, its secret chambers and basement crematorium disposing of dozens of victims, mostly young women drawn to the World's Fair. Holmes's public persona was flawless, a respected doctor and entrepreneur who donated to charities and charmed neighbors. But his private life was a labyrinth of fraud and betrayal. He juggled multiple wives, Myrta Belknap in Wilmette, Georgiana, Yoke in Chicago, and Clara Lovering, abandoned in New Hampshire, each unaware of the others. His romantic conquests, like Minnie Williams, often ended in death, their wealth absorbed into his schemes. Holmes's frauds were as bold as his murders. He defrauded creditors, forging checks and defaulting on loans to fund the castle's construction and his lavish lifestyle. By 1893, he owed thousands equivalent to hundreds of thousands today to suppliers who provided materials for his hotel. He dodged payments with charm, promising future profits from the fair. One supplier, a lumber merchant, later testified, Holmes's smile could sell you a dream, but his debts were a nightmare. He also ran insurance scams, faking deaths to collect payouts. In 1893, he insured his accomplice, Benjamin Petezel, for $10,000, a scheme that would later prove his undoing. These frauds, documented in court records, show a man whose greed matched his bloodlust. His victims were often women seeking opportunity in Chicago. Emmeline Sigrand, a stenographer, vanished after accepting Holmes's proposal in 1892. Julia Connor and her daughter Pearl Tennants in the castle disappeared in 1891, their bodies likely dissolved in acid. Holmes's method was chilling. He'd lure women with jobs, or romance isolate them in soundproof rooms and kill them with gas or poison. Their remains were disposed of in the basement, where he used acid vats, or sold skeletons to medical schools. Trial records estimate at least 27 murders, though some historians like Eric Larson suggest up to 200 given the fair's transient population. The chaos of 1893. Chicago, with millions passing through, masked these disappearances as families searched fruitlessly for loved ones. Holmes's recklessness grew with his success. He hired accomplices like Petezel, a carpenter turned con man, to carry out scams, but his trust in others was a weak link. Petezel, loyal but greedy, began questioning Holmes's plans, especially the insurance frauds. Meanwhile, creditors and insurers grew suspicious. In 1893, a furniture supplier sued Holmes for unpaid bills, prompting a brief investigation into his finances. Holmes deflected it with charm, but the scrutiny was a warning. Neighbors, still enamored, noticed oddities, delivery men carting away trunks at night, strange smells from the castle's basement, but dismissed them as quirks of a busy entrepreneur. Modern criminologists note Holmes's psychopathy allowed him to compartmentalize his crimes, but his overconfidence was a fatal flaw, akin to serial killers like Dennis Rader, who taunted authorities. For the victims' families, the pain was a silent agony. Letters from 1893, preserved in Chicago archives, show relatives begging police for answers about missing sisters or daughters, only to be told they'd likely run off. One sister of Emmeline Sigrand wrote she was full of hope in Chicago, but now she's gone, and I fear the worst. Holmes's charm kept suspicion at bay, but his web of lies was fraying. How long could he juggle murder, fraud, and a double life before the law closed in? The next chapter takes us into the unraveling of Holmes's empire as a tenacious detective begins to hunt the monster of Chicago. The detective's pursuit and Holmes's flight. H.H. Holmes's murder castle stood as a silent predator in Chicago, its chambers claiming countless lives during the 1893 World's Fair. But by 1894, the cracks in his empire of lies were widening. His relentless scams and murders had drawn suspicion, and a tenacious detective was closing in, determined to unmask the charming doctor as a monster. As Holmes fled Chicago, his web of deceit unraveled, leaving a trail of bodies and broken lives. How could a man so cunning slip through justice's grasp, only to run straight into it? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of H.H. Holmes's crimes, hit that subscribe button like this video and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Let's dive into the pursuit that brought Holmes's horrors into the light as a relentless hunter chased America's first serial killer. By late 1893, Holmes, now 33, was riding high, but teetering on the edge. The World's Fair had ended, leaving Chicago quieter, but no less scarred by his deeds. His murder castle had claimed dozens of lives. Young women like Emmeline Sigrand and Minnie Williams, lured by promises of work or love, vanished into its soundproof rooms. Holmes's scams were equally bold. He defrauded creditors for thousands using forged checks and fake identities to keep his hotel running. His insurance frauds staging deaths for payouts were growing reckless. In 1893, he insured his accomplice, Benjamin Pitezel, for $10,000, a scheme that would spark his downfall. Holmes's charm had long kept suspicion at bay, but his arrogance was his Achilles' heel. Creditors, tired of his excuses, began suing him for unpaid debts over $50,000, in modern terms, for castle supplies alone. In early 1894, a furniture supplier's lawsuit led police to inspect the murder castle, though they found nothing suspicious at first. Holmes's neighbors, still charmed by his generosity, dismissed oddities like late-night deliveries or chemical smells from the basement. But one man wasn't fooled. Frank Geyer, a Philadelphia detective with a reputation for dogged persistence. In 1894, Geyer was hired by the Fidelity Mutual Life Insurance Company to investigate a suspicious claim involving Pitezel's death, which Holmes had staged in Philadelphia to collect the payout. Holmes's plan was audacious. He killed Pitezel, his loyal accomplice, in September 1894, burning the body to fake an accidental explosion. Claiming the insurance money, Holmes convinced Pitezel's wife, Carrie, that her husband was alive and hiding. But Geyer's instincts told him otherwise. He tracked Holmes across cities Chicago, Philadelphia, Indianapolis, following a trail of aliases and forged documents. Geyer's investigation uncovered Holmes's multiple marriages and scams, including his wives, Myrta Belknap and Georgiana Yoke, who knew nothing of his crimes. Court records from 1895 show Geyer's meticulous work. He found witnesses who saw Holmes with Pitezel's children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, whom Holmes had taken from Carrie under false pretenses. The fate of Pitezel's children was a horror that stunned even seasoned investigators. Holmes, traveling with the children under aliases, killed them one by one. Alice and Nellie were found suffocated in a Toronto cellar in 1895, their bodies stuffed in a trunk. Howard's remains were later discovered in Indianapolis, burned in a stove. Geyer's discovery of these murders, detailed in his 1896 memoir, The Holmes-Pitezel Case, exposed Holmes's cruelty to a shocked public. Modern criminologists note his psychopathy allowed him to kill children without remorse, a trait shared with predators like John Wayne Gacy. The murders of Pitezel's children, trusted to Holmes by their mother, marked a new low, shattering any illusion of his humanity. For the victims' families, the pain was unbearable. Carrie Pitezel, learning her husband and 3 children were dead, collapsed in grief, her letters to Geyer begging for answers preserved in archives. Other families, like those of Emmeline Sigrand and Julia Connor, began to suspect their loved ones had fallen to Holmes, their hopes crushed by his lies. As Geyer closed in, Holmes fled to Boston, then Canada, his charm failing under pressure. But could he outrun a detective as relentless as death itself? The next chapter takes us into Holmes's capture and the trial that exposed his monstrous deeds to the world. The capture and the unmasking of a monster, HHH. Holmes had danced through Chicago's shadows, his murder castle a silent tomb for countless victims, but by late 1894, his empire of lies was crumbling under the relentless pursuit of Detective Frank Geyer. Fleeing across cities with blood on his hands, Holmes's charm could no longer outrun the law. His capture would reveal a serial killer whose crimes shocked a nation, exposing the depths of his depravity. How could a man so cunning finally fall into justice's grasp? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of HH, Holmes's horrors. Hit that subscribe button like this video and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Let's dive into Holmes's capture and the investigation that tore open his world of terror. By November 1894, Holmes, now 33, was a fugitive on the run. His murder of Benjamin Pitezel and the subsequent insurance fraud had drawn the attention of Philadelphia detective Frank Geyer, hired by Fidelity Mutual Life Insurance, to investigate the suspicious $10,000 claim. Holmes had killed Pitezel in Philadelphia, staging the death as an accident, and then fled with Pitezel's 3 children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, under the pretense of protecting them. Geyer's pursuit was relentless. He tracked Holmes through aliases across Indianapolis, Toronto, and Boston, piecing together a trail of fraud and murder. Court records from 1895 show Geyer's brilliance. He uncovered hotel receipts, train tickets, and witnesses who saw Holmes with the children unaware of their grim fate. Holmes's capture came on November 17, 1894, in Boston. Geyer, working with local police, arrested him on charges of insurance fraud. But the true horror emerged as Geyer dug deeper. Searching properties linked to Holmes, he found the bodies of Alice and Nellie Pitezel in a Toronto cellar, suffocated and stuffed in a trunk. Howard Pitezel's charred remains were later discovered in an Indianapolis stove. These discoveries, detailed in Geyer's 1896 memoir, The Holmes-Pitezel Case, stunned the public, revealing Holmes's brutality extended to children. Modern criminologists note his psychopathy allowed him to kill without remorse, his charm masking a complete lack of empathy, akin to serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer. The investigation turned to Chicago's Murder Castle, where police uncovered its sinister design. In July 1895, investigators entered the Inglewood Hotel, finding soundproof rooms, hidden chutes, and a basement with a crematorium, acid vats, and human bones. A Chicago Tribune report described a steel vault where victims were gassed, their screams trapped within. Evidence of at least 27 murders emerged, though historians like Eric Larson estimate up to 200 given the fair's transient population. Holmes's meticulous fraud records contrasted with his silence on murders, as if erasing his victims' existence. The castle partially burned in a mysterious 1895 fire, possibly set by Holmes's allies, yielded fragments of jewelry and clothing, linking to missing women like Emmeline Sygrind and Minnie Williams. Holmes's personal life unraveled under scrutiny. His wives Myrta Belknap, Georgiana Yoke, and Clara Lovering were shocked to learn of his bigamy and crimes. Myrta, living in Wilmette, had believed Holmes was a traveling businessman. Georgiana, who traveled with him, thought him a devoted fiancé. Their testimony, recorded in 1895 court documents, painted a man who lied effortlessly, his charm a tool to manipulate trust. For victims' families, the revelations were devastating. Carrie Pitezel, Benjamin's widow, learned her husband and 3 children were dead. Her grief captured in letters begging Geyer for justice. Families of fairgoers like Julia Connors realized their loved ones had vanished into Holmes's castle, their hopes crushed by his deceit. The public was horrified. Newspapers dubbed Holmes America's first serial killer, his crimes a dark stain on Chicago's World's Fair glory. Modern psychological analysis suggests Holmes's need for control drove his murders. The castle, a physical extension of his dominance. His ability to blend into society, charming neighbors while killing in secret mirrors, predators like Ted Bundy. As Holmes awaited trial in Philadelphia, the nation braced for a reckoning. Would his silver tongue save him, or would justice finally expose the full scope of his horrors? The next chapter takes us into Holmes's trial, where his monstrous deeds faced the light of day. The trial that shocked a nation. H.H. Holmes, the charming doctor who turned Chicago's murder castle into a slaughterhouse, faced justice in 1895, his web of lies and murders exposed by a relentless detective. Captured in Boston, Holmes could no longer hide behind his polished facade As the nation learned of his atrocities, dozens, perhaps hundreds, killed in his hotel of horrors. His trial in Philadelphia became a spectacle revealing a serial killer whose crimes redefined evil. Could a man so cunning talk his way out of the gallows? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of H.H. Holmes's downfall, hit that subscribe button like this video and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Let's dive into the trial that unmasked America's first serial killer and shook a nation to its core. In May 1895, Holmes, now 34, stood trial in Philadelphia for the murder of Benjamin Pitezel, his accomplice whose $10,000 insurance fraud had sparked Detective Frank Geyer's pursuit. The courtroom was packed with reporters from the Chicago Tribune and Philadelphia Inquirer, capturing every detail. Holmes, dressed in a tailored suit, exuded confidence, his blue eyes scanning the crowd as if still in control. The prosecution, led by District Attorney George Graham, presented a damning case. Holmes had killed Pitezel in September 1894, staging the death as an accident, and then murdered Pitezel's 3 children, Alice, Nellie, and Howard, to cover his tracks. Geyer's testimony, drawn from his 1896 memoir, The Holmes Pitezel Case, detailed finding the children's bodies in Toronto and Indianapolis, their deaths marked by suffocation and burning. The trial expanded to Holmes's Chicago crimes. Investigators had searched the murder castle in July 1895, uncovering its horrors: soundproof rooms, gas chambers, and a basement with a crematorium, acid vats, and human remains. Evidence linked Holmes to at least 27 murders, including women like Emmeline Sigrand, Julia Connor, and Minnie Williams, all lured to the castle during the 1893 World's Fair. Prosecutors presented bone fragments and personal items, like a locket traced to Sigrand, found in the basement. A Chicago police report described a chute where bodies were dropped from upper floors, a grim efficiency that stunned the court. Some historians, like Adam Selzer, argue the death toll could be as high as 200, given the fair's transient population. Holmes's defense was audacious. Representing himself at times, he claimed Pitezel's death was accidental and denied killing the children, spinning tales of aliases and conspiracies. His charm, once a weapon, faltered under scrutiny. Witnesses, including Carrie Pitezel, testified to his deceit, recounting how he convinced her that her husband was alive while hiding her children's murders. Her tearful testimony, recorded in court documents, moved jurors. "He took my babies, promising safety, and gave them death." Holmes's multiple wives, Myrta Belknap, Georgiana, Yoke, and Clara Lovering, testified unaware of his bigamy until the trial. Their shock painted a picture of a man who manipulated trust effortlessly, a trait modern psychologists link to psychopathy, comparing him to Ted Bundy. The public was horrified. Newspapers called Holmes a fiend in human form, his crimes a betrayal of Chicago's World's Fair glory. The trial revealed societal failures. Police had ignored early complaints about missing fairgoers, assuming they'd vanished in the city's chaos. Families of victims, like Julia Connor's sister, wept as they learned of loved ones dissolved in acid or burned in Holmes's furnace. The court sentenced Holmes to death on November 30th, 1895, for Pitezel's murder, though the full scope of his crimes was never prosecuted. Modern criminologists note his trial was a turning point, exposing the need for better policing in urban America, where anonymity enabled predators like Holmes. As Holmes awaited execution, he penned a memoir, Holmes' Own Story, claiming innocence with chilling arrogance. But could his final words reveal the truth behind his monstrous soul, or would they be another lie? The next chapter takes us into Holmes's final days, where his fate and legacy were sealed in a chilling climax. The Final Days and the Shadow of the Gallows. H.H. Holmes, America's first documented serial killer, awaited his fate in a Philadelphia cell in 1896. his murder castle exposed as a house of horrors that claimed countless lives. Convicted of murdering his accomplice, Benjamin Petezel, Holmes faced the gallows, but even in his final days, his charm and lies wove a chilling enigma. With the nation reeling from his crimes, he penned confessions that blurred truth and deception, leaving a legacy as twisted as his mind. Could a man so steeped in evil show remorse, or was his final act just another performance? If you're gripped by this chilling saga of Weird History, Holmes's downfall, hit that subscribe button like this video and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Let's dive into Holmes's final days, where the shadow of the gallows revealed the true depth of his darkness. After his November 1895 conviction, Holmes, now 34, was confined in Philadelphia's Moyamensing prison, a grim fortress where he awaited execution. The man who had charmed Chicago with his doctor's smile was now a pariah, his crimes killing at least 27 people, possibly up to 200 in his murder castle splashed across newspapers like the Philadelphia Inquirer. Yet even in chains, Holmes remained defiant. He wrote Holmes's own story, a memoir published in 1895, claiming innocence and blaming others for his crimes. The text, filled with half-truths, described his scams but denied most murders, painting himself as a misunderstood entrepreneur. Modern psychologists see this as classic psychopathy, with Holmes manipulating perception to the end, akin to Ted Bundy's jailhouse interviews. Holmes's confessions were a twisted spectacle. In April 1896, desperate for attention, he sold a full confession to the Hearst newspapers for $7,500, hundreds of thousands today, claiming to have killed 27 people, including Petezel's children and World's Fair victims like Emmeline Sigrand and Minnie Williams. He described luring women to his castle, gassing them in soundproof rooms and dissolving bodies in acid vats. But he also exaggerated, claiming murders investigators couldn't verify, and later recanted, saying he was possessed by Satan. This oscillation, detailed in 1896 court records, baffled the public. Some believed his remorse, others saw a con man's final ploy. Criminologists note this mirrors modern serial killers like Jeffrey Dahmer, who mixed truth with lies to control their narrative. Prison life stripped away Holmes's polish. Guards described him as pale and restless, pacing his cell and scribbling notes. He requested meetings with priests claiming to seek redemption, but his cold eyes betrayed no genuine guilt. One guard, quoted in a 1896 report, said Holmes prays like a man who knows the world is watching. His wives, Myrta Belknap, Georgiana Yoke, and Clara Lovering, visited him, their shock at his bigamy and murders recorded in tearful letters. Carrie Petezel, widow of his accomplice, refused to see him, her grief over her 3 children's deaths too raw. For victims' families, Holmes's confessions were a gut punch, confirming loved ones like Julia Connor and her daughter Pearl had been erased in his basement. The public was both horrified and fascinated. Newspapers dubbed Holmes the arch-fiend, his crimes a dark counterpoint to the 1893 World's Fair's optimism. The murder castle, partially destroyed in a mysterious 1895 fire, was dismantled after his trial. But its legend grew with rumors of ghosts haunting Inglewood. Modern historians like Eric Larson argue the fire, possibly set by Holmes's allies, destroyed key evidence, leaving the true death toll a mystery. The trial exposed societal flaws. Chicago's police had ignored early complaints about missing fairgoers, assuming they'd vanished in the city's chaos. Holmes's ability to exploit urban anonymity foreshadowed modern urban crime, highlighting the need for better policing. As execution day loomed, Holmes remained an enigma. Would his final moments reveal the man behind the monster, or would he take his secrets to the grave? The next chapter unveils Holmes's execution and the haunting legacy that cemented his place as America's most infamous killer. The Execution and the Enduring Curse of H. Holmes. H. Holmes. America's first documented serial killer met his end in 1896, but his name became a chilling legend, etched in history as the architect of the murder castle, a house of horrors that claimed dozens, perhaps hundreds of lives. His execution was meant to close a dark chapter, but the shadow of his crimes lingered, haunting Chicago and sparking myths that still unsettle us. What kind of legacy does a man leave when his genius is matched only by his evil? If you've been gripped by this chilling saga of H. Holmes's terror, hit that subscribe button like this video and share it with your friends to uncover more shocking tales from history's darkest corners. Drop a comment below. Was Holmes a monster born of his time, or a timeless evil? Let's dive into his final moments and the haunting legacy that defines him. On May 7, 1896, Holmes, now 34, faced execution at Philadelphia's Moyamensing prison. Convicted of murdering Benjamin Pitezel and linked to at least 27 deaths in his Chicago murder castle, he stood as a symbol of unimaginable cruelty. The gallows awaited a stark contrast to the polished doctor who had charmed victims into his deadly hotel during the 1893 World's Fair. In his final hours, Holmes remained an enigma. He penned letters, including one to his wife, Georgiana Yoke, claiming innocence with a calm that unnerved guards. A Philadelphia Inquirer report described him as composed, almost cheerful, as he ate a breakfast of eggs and coffee, his blue eyes scanning his cell as if plotting one last escape. The execution was a public spectacle. Crowds gathered outside the prison, eager for justice against the man dubbed the Arch-Fiend. At 10:13 a.m., Holmes climbed the scaffold, his hands bound. He spoke briefly, denying most murders, but admitting sins against God. The trapdoor opened, but the hanging was botched. Holmes's neck didn't break, and he strangled slowly for 15 minutes, his body twitching as the crowd gasped. Guards later found a note in his cell requesting his body be encased in concrete, fearing grave robbers, a chilling irony for a man who sold skeletons. His wish was granted, and he was buried in Philadelphia's Holy Cross Cemetery, his grave unmarked to deter vandals. The aftermath left Chicago and the nation reeling. The murder castle, partially burned in 1895, was razed, but its site remained cursed in local lore. Englewood residents reported strange lights and cries near the lot, spawning tales of victims' ghosts. Newspapers like the Chicago Tribune fueled the legend, calling Holmes a devil in human form. His crimes, killing women like Emmeline Sigrand, Julia Connor, and Minnie Williams, and Pitezel's 3 children, left families shattered. Carrie Pitezel, widowed and childless, faded into obscurity. Her grief documented in 1896, letters begging for closure. Other families searching for missing fairgoers learned their loved ones had vanished into Holmes's acid vats, or furnace, their names lost to history. Holmes's legacy shaped more than folklore. His trial exposed flaws in urban policing. Chicago's overwhelmed forces had ignored early reports of missing persons, assuming they'd left the city. This spurred reforms, with police developing better tracking methods for transients, a precursor to modern missing persons systems. Modern criminologists like Catherine Ramsland compare Holmes to serial killers like John Wayne Gacy, noting his psychopathic ability to blend into society while killing in secret. His murder castle, with its gas chambers and hidden chutes, inspired horror fiction from Gothic novels to films like Saw. A 2023 ex-post called him America's original boogeyman-proof evil, can hide behind a smile. The true toll of Holmes's crimes remains a mystery. Trial records confirm 27 murders, but estimates of 200 reflect the World's Fair's chaos, where disappearances went unnoticed. His story is a grim warning: unchecked power and urban anonymity can breed monsters. The image of a single locket found in the castle's ashes and traced to Emmeline Sigrand lingers as a symbol of lives erased. Holmes was not just a killer, He was a betrayal of trust, a dark mirror to the optimism of his era. If this tale of H. Holmes shocked you, subscribe to Weird History Unveiled, like this video, and share it to spread these chilling stories. Comment below, is Holmes a product of his time's chaos, or a singular evil? What historical figure should we uncover next?